Hi, Gordon.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
So glad to have you. How's it going?
Not bad, all things considered. What about you?
Yeah, it's always a little bit of a loaded question in 2020, isn't
Mm.
it? I'm all right. I'm here in Brooklyn, in New York City. That's where I'm joining from. Where are you right now?
I'm in Sydney, Australia.
Okay. On the other side, here we are, meeting on the internet. The only way we really have in this year.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Well,
yes.
yeah. Well, I'm glad
Early
that you're
morning.
able to be here. Glad that it's an early morning for you.
Not important, but yes. I guess it's evening for you, hey? Or afternoon, right?
Yeah, I might be getting a little bit of a delay, so forgive me if that ends up affecting things. But I would love to just start by introducing myself to everyone again. I know some people already heard at the very beginning, but I am Whitney Bauk. I'm the senior sustainability reporter at fashionista.com. I've been writing about sustainability for 7+ years now, and I'm really excited to have a conversation about transparency today. Gordon, I would love to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Oh, hi, everybody. My name's Gordon Renouf. I'm one of the co-founders of Good On You, which we'll hear more about today. But Good On You is a service that helps people check how sustainable and ethical fashion brands are, and also discover new brands that might align with their values better, as well as meeting their fashion needs.
Rad. So the topic of the conversation today is a little bit about transparency, and we're also going to talk about greenwashing and how do you make decisions about brands. I'd love to just start, since the sort of overall theme that Sustainable Fashion Forum is dealing with this month is fashion horror stories. What was the sort of fashion horror story for you that first sort of made you want to get involved in sustainability and sort of ethics side of the fashion conversation?
Yeah, well, mine isn't really a fashion horror story. It's more a concern about the way the products and services that we use impact on the world, on people, on planet, and animals and other issues. So I've got my past is quite a long time working as a consumer advocate. So standing up for consumer rights, vulnerable consumers at some times, consumers generally at other times, and all through that journey, we can see that people are concerned about how the products they are buying are impacting on the issues that they care about, whether that be the environment, whether it be workers in the supply chain, modern slavery and so forth, whether it be animals, whether it be other issues like diversity. And so when I left my last job in those consumer organisations, I wanted to work with people to empower consumers, to make it much easier for consumers to choose products that align with their values. Sure, there were services out like certifications and fair trade and so forth, but they were only identifying maybe 0.5%, 1% of the market, and the products that were certified didn't necessarily meet consumers' needs. So we figured that there was a better way, and that consumers have the right to know how the products that they buy impact on the issues that they care about. And so it's basically from that framework that we started looking at how could we help consumers make those choices. Balance, it's a trade-off. It's a balance between the fashion I want, in this case, how I want to look, how much I can spend, and the values that are important to me. There's never, or very rarely, a perfect solution. You can rarely get the perfect dress that is also the most sustainable dress, for example.
Mm-hmm. So how did you sort of decide to focus on fashion? You were saying this, for you, it didn't necessarily start with fashion. It sort of started with concerns about the impact on people and the planet. How did you decide to sort of hone in on apparel specifically?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I mean, I came from a broad-based consumer organisation, and the concern was how do any products impact on the environment, impact on people. We did a project with Amnesty International, for example, that looked at children's toys and were made in conditions of slavery and child labour, just by way of example. So when I left there, it was a question about broad-based consumer empowerment, but it was also about being focused and picking an industry or picking a product category that had some really important issues. And so we did already choose to look initially at both fashion and electronics, as they were important industries that had big impacts, just before the Rana Plaza disaster happened in 2013. And for that reason, but also because people were really showing a lot of interest in the initial data we were putting forward around fashion, we focused in on fashion. And my co-founder, Sandra, has a much stronger fashion background. But on the other hand, my mother was a fashion agent, so I feel I have some connection to the industry as well.
I just want to make a note really quick to people who are tuning in. I'm seeing a few questions starting to show up in the comment box. If you can actually hit the little question mark in the bottom right corner of your screen and add your questions there, that'll make it easier for us to find them at the end. Okay, so yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Good On You, what it is, sort of how it works, and what the experience is like, both for brands who are sort of on the platform and for consumers who are using it to sort of sort through brands.
Yeah, so starting from consumers, I mean, our aim, our vision is that you as a shopper can find out how any brand that you might come across impacts on the issues that are important to you. But we started with getting close to 3,000 brands now, and we're looking at labour, environment and animal impacts, and not yet at other things that people might be concerned about. So the aim is that you can just check how any brand rates before you decide whether you want to buy it or not. So that's the first thing that we offer. The second thing we offer is the ability to discover new brands that rate highly on the issues that are important to you. And so in a bit more detail, you can type in the name of a brand, whether that's a new brand, small brand you've discovered, or a major brand like Nike or H&M or whatever, and we will show you an overall rating out of 5, individual rating for animals, labour and environment, and then a bit of detail on why what our research shows about that particular brand. And then we'll try and help you find brands that rate more highly, that meet your needs. You can do that through our copy, through our articles and so forth on goodonyou.eco. You can use a search by category. So you can look up activewear brands. Very soon, and you can filter that in various ways, including very soon by country. And you can use our similar brands recommendations, where we try and suggest more sustainable, more ethical brands that have the same kinds of clothes at roughly the same kind of price point as the brand that you were searching.
Okay. And how do you decide sort of which brands to even rank on the app or on the platform? Is it something based on like how frequently they're searched for, or sort of like what top earning brands are, or how do you decide which to include?
Yeah. So we started with, so really, if you look at the two things we're trying to help you with, we're trying to help you find how the brand you know rates. We're trying to help you surface new brands that might meet your needs. So the two kinds of brands we focus on most are the largest, most popular brands, judged by how big they are in public information, but also how often people are searching for them. In the Good On You app, if you search for a brand that isn't there, you can hit a button and you can tell us you want us to look it up, and we take account of the votes effectively to influence which brands we add. So that's the mainstream popular brands that people are looking for. And then on the other hand, we're trying to give you lots of alternative options. Ideally, we'd have numerous alternative options in every category, at every price point, in every country. I wouldn't say we've got there for every country, for every category, for every price point yet, but that's what we're aiming for. So, we're looking for brands that are similar to brands that people are searching for, or in categories that people are searching for, perhaps in preference to the 99th brand that just makes organic T-shirts. So, I think this is kind of a bit of a tangent, but out there in sustainable fashion, if I was starting a brand, I would go, what kinds of products do people buy a lot of, but there are not any sustainable alternatives? I wouldn't be making the next T-shirt brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And when we're talking about sustainability, I think it's important to sort of start by defining what we mean by that, because obviously that word has really expanded to include a lot of different things at this point. It means different things to different people. So when you're talking about, even just saying sort of offhand, a sustainable T-shirt brand, what does sustainable mean to you in 2020?
Yeah. So I think it's slightly different answer depending if you're looking at from the consumer or the shopper's point of view to the brand's point of view. if you're a consumer, then, you know, it's your values and you will choose to shop according to what's important to you. Now, what's important to us at Good On You is that we treat workers right, we look after the environment, we avoid climate change, and we're not you know, we treat animals well. So other things are also important to us as people, including diversity, but our system doesn't yet accommodate that. But other people may have other issues, or they may only care about some of those issues. So as a shopper, our ultimate goal is to help you. And so there's a little bit of personalisation in there at the moment. And of course, you can look at the ratings for each individual area, animals, environment and labour, and kind of adjust your shopping accordingly. So from the shopper's point of view, we respect that you have your own values. We can't dictate your values to you. But from a brand's point of view, of course, a brand can say, we're a vegan brand, we don't care at all about the environment or workers, we're just going to give you vegan products. But we will not rate you on that basis. We will say, if you're a fashion brand, we think you have a responsibility to be addressing each of the issues that our consumers generally think are important. And at the moment, we're trying to help consumers understand the impacts on people, planet, and animals. And so we will expect that brands address not just each of those issues, but all the material issues in there. So what we've done is we've done research, we've looked at the science, we've also consulted with a wide range of civil society organisations and industry bodies about what are the key ways in which the fashion industry impacts on people, planet, and animals. What are the things that have negative impacts on those three areas? And we're looking for brands to be transparent about each of them, and ideally to address as many of them as they can, and to provide detailed information about how they do that. So people do wake up and they say, I'm going to have a fashion brand that, you know, addresses climate change, and God help us, they might think, well, we'll do that by offsetting. That would be a really bad idea for a whole heap of reasons. One, they're not thinking about how the clothes are made. Two, they're not thinking about other important environmental issues like resource use or chemical impacts. And thirdly, because offsetting is really a least good strategy for responding to climate change. So I think as a brand, you have a responsibility to understand, how does your brand impact across the board? I think I've seen in the Sustainable Fashion Forum feed just recently, making the point, which I 100% agree with, that brands will sometimes hero one thing they're doing, a sustainable collection, or we recycle all our packaging, and so aren't we great? But if they're not addressing the other impacts, in that case, the more important impacts that they're having on the environment, as well as the impacts on workers and animals, then you're not going to get a high Good On You rating. So if that answers the question, what does sustainability mean to us, then that's where we're coming from.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I encounter a lot when I'm talking to people about sustainability is people not knowing how to research the things that they care about from different brands. And I know that's sort of part of the gap that Good On You is trying to fill, saying like, yep, we're going to do the research for you. We're going to make it really easy for you to understand. But what is Good On You actually looking at when you're saying, okay, here's the brand, you know, we've established sort of, these are the topics that we care about. These are sort of the themes that we're interested in going into. Are you just looking at what a company publishes about itself? Are you looking at what journalists might have dug up about a company? Like, how are you evaluating each company?
So the first, the two parts of the answer. One is more directly what you're talking about, on where do we get the information from? And then secondly, a little bit more on the sub-issues that we look at. So within environment, we look at some specific issues within labour, etc. So, I mean, the first and most important point is that we, along with, you know, everybody from Fashion Revolution to some major brands, believe that brands, because you as a brand has a duty to help the consumer exercise their right to consume responsibly. That is, the consumer has a right to know about your impacts. We expect brands to be transparent. And by transparent, we mean telling the good and the bad about how you as a brand are impacting on the issues that we're looking at, people, planet, animals, and the sub-issues within environment, for example, impacts on climate change, resource use, chemicals, water, and so on. And so, and it's important to give concrete and specific and relevant information, and not simply highlight the one thing you're doing good and ignoring, or the 7 things you're doing good, but ignoring a very important issue. For example, there is we've seen some, medium-sized, well-known-ish sustainable fashion brands that are in fact doing a great job, for example, perhaps on all labour rights issues, and maybe they're using some sustainable materials, but they don't address chemical issues at all. And rather than saying, hey, we're going to get to that next year or something, they just pretend it doesn't exist. And that to me is somewhat deceitful, because you're not being fully transparent with the consumer about your impacts. So back to your specific question, the primary source of information is this obligation on brands to be transparent, and transparent in some specific detail. We do look at other sources of information. Obviously, the most important one is the certification schemes that you have. And so if you have certification, it's about 60 that we look at, the brands commonly or uncommonly have. And we've analysed each of those schemes to look at, well, what do they actually address? I mean, this scheme only addresses whether you have, child labour in your supply chain. This one addresses a whole lot of environmental issues and some labour issues. And so we kind of map each of those certifications or accreditations or tools that you may be using to the set of issues that we look at. We also look at things like parent company sustainability reports. So if you're owned by a large brand that has a corporate sustainability report, we'd look at those details. And then we will look at other publicly available information. That's more likely to be the case with the bigger brands. Like if there is, a report, for example, a report issued by, I think it's called the Australian Strategic Policies Institute, early this year, identified the brands that were sourcing cotton from Xinjiang province in China, and with that issue that Uyghurs being high risk of being in forced labour, Uyghur people in that supply chain. And so we took account of that external source. So it's not just some random allegation in the Daily Mail that such and such a brand is exploiting their workers, but a report about a serious issue from Human Rights Benchmark or the Strategic Policies Institute or International Labour Rights Forum or something like that. We will definitely bring that information into our ratings.
Yeah, so I'm totally with you in believing transparency is really important. Been reporting on it for a long time. I report on Fashion Revolution's Transparency Index when they release that every year. I am curious about whether or not Good On You takes into account the size of companies, because one of the things that has seemed clear from looking at some of the transparency reports that come out, it's like, if you're a really, really big company, you might have more resources to be transparent, to know everything about your factories, but you could still be making fast fashion. And so something like H&M tends to get pretty high transparency ratings. But a lot of people sort of in the sustainable fashion community can feel like, wait, what? Like, they're still making fast fashion. They're pushing things out at such an incredible rate. How do you balance that with the fact that, like, smaller brands who might be making really, tighter edited collections might not know as much about their own supply chains?
Yeah. So a couple of points there. The first one is that, yes, we do have a different set of questions and scoring for large brands and small brands. And so we do expect that large brands should be addressing a lot more issues. A large brand has the power to influence its whole supply chain. A small brand is lucky if it can influence the factory that makes its clothes. The second thing is that even within large brands, we look very closely at whether a brand is using a fast fashion model and will penalise it for that. So even though it may, as you say, be very good at being transparent and even having some initiatives which are actually worthwhile, it's still, as you say, working with a fast fashion model, which puts pressures on suppliers, can impact labour rights, tends to use less lasting clothes, and anyway encourages people to throw them away and get new ones. So we definitely mark down for that. So yes, large brands have a lot. We have more than 500 data points that we look at for large brands, much less for smaller brands. We also specifically identify fast fashion brands and score them down. We went through a long consultation process last year with a range of industry and civil society organisations, including Cradle to Cradle and Fashion Revolution, Fashion for Good, and some other industry bodies. And we, as a result of that, we made a couple of changes to methodology. We added some issues which we hadn't identified when we first started, like microplastics. We added some additional animal welfare issues. We added this scoring around fast fashion and a few other things, expectations for larger brands. Quite a few larger brands have come out with a lower score, moved from 3 out of 5 to 2 out of 5. As a result of the re-rate based on that new methodology. Oh, in addition to which, we're using the Fashion Transparency Index as a partial input to our labour score for those 250 brands that Fashion Revolution has marked for. So we're trying to make sure that there's another issue going here, which is too many different sources of information for consumers and which ones should they work with. So we're trying to enhance our cooperation and collaboration with organisations like the Fashion Transparency Index and others like the Open Apparel Coalition, so Open Apparel Registry, for example, so that we're trying to be on the same page and give the same message to consumers.
Gotcha. Have you had any conversations with brands where you've seen them increasing their transparency and releasing more information because of platforms like Good On You or things like the Fashion Revolution Transparency Index?
Well, actually, that actually happened in the first week of Good On You. So Good On You launched in Australia about 5 years ago. We ran a crowdfunding campaign to see if people wanted this. They supported it. We launched the first version of the app. We had 10,000 people in Australia download the app within 8 days. And within 2 weeks, we had a brand getting in touch with us saying, hey, why have you scored it so badly? And we talked them through it. And they said, oh, yeah, we could communicate that we do this and do this and do this. So, you know, in month one, a brand had started telling you that they did or didn't use Angora and they did or didn't use this other thing and a few things like that. And so we saw an impact immediately. And we have conversations with brands all the time who come back to us and say, but we're a sustainable brand. And then the conversation might go one of two ways. It might go, so you're a sustainable brand, you think, because 30% of your product uses modal, which is not necessarily a particularly great material anyway, although it's somewhat sustainable, and you do nothing else. So maybe you need to work harder. Equally often, people come to us and say, we do this, 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 and this, and our answer is, how would your users know that? How would your customers know that? Do you know that more than half your customers are really interested in this stuff? You should be telling them that you're doing those things, and then they will become more transparent, and in due course, we will revise their rating.
And what are the, I mean, in theory, the benefit for brands of being involved in something like Good On You is really clear. Do you have any metrics that sort of back what kind of conversions brands are seeing, or like whether or not, you know, what new brand discovery looks like? Like, how does this actually play out for brands?
Yeah, so we assess all brands and criteria, and that's done kind of independently of any kind of content that we publish about brands. The feedback we do get from brands, whether we're working with them or not, is often, you know, great. So the first thing is that we have maybe 20 brands a week, maybe more, approaching us because they want to be listed on Good On You. So those brands obviously seeing that there'll be some benefit to them if they're getting a 4 or 5 star listing on Good On You, and consumers can find out more easily that they are sustainable and that they've been ranked. So we also do work with some brands to highlight them to consumers. As you'll see, there's sometimes sponsored posts on our Instagram, for example, and many of those brands report to us that works for them. I think a couple more quantitative bits of information or data points. Not Good On You at all, but List, for example, reported that as you know, in the 6 months to April, there was a massive increase. I can't remember the number, but 60 or 80% increase in searches for sustainable fashion on their platform. Also, Good On You works with retailers to help them identify sustainable brands and also communicate their sustainability to customers. So one example is we work with Farfetch, the global fashion platform. We power their Positively Conscious collection for about the last year. And they reported in April or May that brands that were in that collection that were tagged as positively conscious based on their Good On You rating or other features were getting a much higher sell-through than the other brands on the Farfetch platform. So there really is very strong consumer interest in finding products that meet their fashion needs and are also sustainable. So the message there is you have to have products which are sustainable but also fashionable. And there is a clear benefit to brands in being identified by a credible independent source like Good On You as being as doing the right thing, being transparent and sustainable. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. I'm curious because I feel like, again, having been in this space for a little while, there are a number of different platforms or retailers who have kind of tried to do something like what Good On You is doing. The number of meetings that I had in like the early 2010s of someone being like, I'm going to be the Walmart of sustainable fashion was just staggering. And it's interesting to see sort of which ones are still around and which ones aren't. I'm curious what you think Good On You is doing right that has sort of enabled it to last, at least so far.
Yeah. Well, I think that we're not trying to be the Walmart of sustainable brands is the starting point. I mean, I do think there is two different jobs. One job is to be a great e-commerce store, give people a good experience, have a good selection, know your particular customer, curate your range, etc., and have good customer service. That's one set of skill set of being a retailer. That's not us. And it's a completely different skill set, which is understanding what consumers are looking for and also understanding the science about how to evaluate sustainability in brands. And that is what we try to be good at. I mean, we employ scientists. We employ people who've got experience in certification schemes and CDP and so forth. We employ people with experience in labour rights campaigning. So we are not trying to be so what I still see this happening, and you will too, that people decide that they're going to be a small, medium or large e-commerce store for sustainable fashion, and they invent their own rating system and they invite brands to fill in information, and then they say, okay, tick you're vegan, tick you've got organic stuff. And I just don't think that's a sustainable strategy because well, firstly, it's not requiring brands to address all the issues. Secondly, I'm very suspicious of privately provided information because there's no accountability. I mean, one thing about Good On You ratings is because it's based on publicly available information, you, having looked at what we look at and look at what the brand says, you can say, I can see a mismatch, or, yeah, I get where you're coming from. And indeed, users will write to us saying, hey, this brand has recently announced this improvement, and you're saying they don't do this thing, and then we have to review the rating. So back to the point. I think, so I suppose your answer is that we have specialised in doing one thing well, which is creating a rating system, which is not our own invention, but is based on standing on the shoulders of giants, if you like. We're looking at all the work that all the other organisations are doing around promoting transparency, about identifying that this is an issue in labour rights field, this is an issue here. I mean, for example, civil society organisations and academics and others have been very suspicious of auditing of factories as the best way to ensure that worker rights are protected. And brands and organisations like Clean Clothes Campaign and so forth have looked at better ways of doing this and focusing more on how can brands empower suppliers to do a better job, how can they support worker empowerment initiatives. And so we've moved our rating system away from solely relying on brands' reports on their audits to looking at whether it wasn't solely, but having strong reliance on that. Much more emphasis on worker empowerment, much more emphasis on supporting suppliers to do the right thing. So I think that's the difference. If your expertise is fashion and selling, then we think that perhaps you should consider outsourcing the assessment of brands and not trying to come up with your own novel system. And brands eventually will get sick of answering different questionnaires from 50 different retailers that they want to be stocked on as well.
So in the interest of full transparency, both from the brands that we're talking about and from those ranking them, how does Good On You function as a business? You're a for-profit, is that correct?
Yeah, so we started as a not-for-profit, but we didn't find any way to scale. So we converted to a for-profit business because our ambition is that consumers anywhere can find out how fashion brands and possibly other categories like beauty in the future impact on the things they care about. And so to get to that sort of scale, to deliver the social mission that we want to deliver, which is better outcomes for the environment, better outcomes for animals, better outcomes for workers in particular, we just couldn't find any way forward with being a not-for-profit. I mean, we couldn't raise enough money to do what we need to do. So we are a company with a social impact mission, led by two people who are very committed to that mission And we choose, we do have some investors, but we only choose investors that are, looking for social impact outcomes, or largely choose those investors. So, and who are pro-sustainability. So, yes, we are a for-profit company, which is why we need to find ways to work with. So we make money in two ways, for full transparency. We make money when a brand is rated on publicly available information against our criteria as being 4 stars or 5 stars, 4 dots or 4 out of 5, or 5 out of 5. We will work with them in terms of promotion. And secondly, we will sell our brand rating data to people like Farfetch, or recently to a buy now, pay later a finance scheme called Afterpay, to promote sustainability on their platforms. And so retailers or other platforms who would like to use Good On You data are potential customers of ours, and we're very happy to talk to any who want to make use of that data.
Gotcha. For obviously, part of what you are trying to do at Good On You is make it really easy for customers to just sort of trust what Good On You is doing, and they don't have to think about it. But for people who want to be able to think critically themselves about their own sort of evaluation of a brand, and or if there's a brand that's not on Good On You yet, what do you think they should be looking for in order to avoid getting taken in by greenwashing?
So what to look for and what to avoid. So what to look for, I think what you're looking for is brands to provide very concrete and specific information that addresses what you know to be the important issues in relation to environment, labour, animals, whatever you're concerned about, diversity policies and so forth. So you don't want people to be saying, we respect our workers, we're an ethical brand, we're a sustainable brand, we only use natural materials. They're all sort of easy to say things, but don't really address the issues that you might want to be concerned about. You want to be looking for brands who say, this is how we address climate change, chemicals, water, reduce our resource use, avoid waste. You want to look for brands who say, this is how we ensure our workers' conditions are good, this is how much we pay them, or this is how much over the minimum wage we pay them. I'll come back to wages in a minute. This is how we empower our workers to look out for their own interests, et cetera, et cetera. This is our animal welfare code. These are the animal products we do and don't use. So you want that level of specificity and detail just on, and then things you want to avoid, things that are kind of warning signs for me are when people say, in the factories we use, we make sure we meet the minimum requirements of the law, full stop. I go, okay, you do nothing, because if you're saying you're meeting the minimum requirements of the law in Bangladesh or Cambodia or Vietnam, then you're not treating your workers very well. And the same if people say, oh, we're really sustainable, we only use natural materials. Cotton is one of the most polluting materials in the world. If you're not addressing the pesticide use and the water use in your cotton supply chain, even the processing of that nice fluffy stuff into a shiny piece of fabric, there are a lot of environmental issues there, and you need to be telling consumers whether you are or aren't addressing those. So the first thing is look for specific concrete information across all the issues that you think are important. The second thing is watch out for people with very vague general statements. And the third one is people really highlighting one or two things they're doing well, but not giving you information about the other things. So and I suppose a fourth one is people highlighting, and this is the hardest one, I think, for consumers, people highlighting a standard or accreditation system that they're involved with if it isn't a very good one. So not all accreditation systems are equal, not all fair trade systems are equal. But I'll call out one. The Better Cotton Initiative is something that quite a few larger brands are involved with. We used to give it some credit. We still do give it some credit. We've marked it down a lot as not really addressing. It's better than conventional cotton, no accreditation, but it's not like half as good as properly credited organic cotton. It's maybe just a bit better. And so, BCI was still certifying cotton sourced from Xinjiang until I think last week. So it's been slow to move on that issue, just to give one example.
Yeah, that seems like a good way of summing it up. I've tried to break down some of those certifications for people before, and it can get really confusing, which I totally get because I work in the industry and I pay attention to this stuff for my job. still sometimes I need to go check my own notes. Like, oh, what did I decide? I thought was legit or not legit about that.
Yeah.
So for brands who are wanting to engage in the sustainability conversation, what are the values that you think are most important, or that you see consumers responding to as sort of the most important things to prioritize?
I think the most important thing is an overall orientation. I mean, I think the brands that are going to do best are the brands that are built to be sustainable, ethical brands from the ground up. So, a way to put that is to sustainability by design. So sustainability by design in terms of the design of your business, and sustainability by design in terms of the design of individual pieces of items, so individual pieces of clothing. So I don't think it's okay to say, we're going to work with these 4 or 5 sustainable fabrics or organic this and certified that, and then here, designer, make whatever you like. Already you can see the designer's not thinking about waste. So I think when you design something, whether it's a simple product or a complex product, using the constraints of being sustainable as a stimulus to creativity, rather than thinking of the sustainability constraints as a barrier to you doing what you want to do, I think is probably the key. Otherwise, you will always be making trade-offs and sustainability will be the loser. So I think that's at the top level. In terms of more concretely, I guess you just need to say, recognize that you're probably passionate about some issues and not others. But other people, your customers, may be passionate about those other issues. So I think you need to make yourself go through, what are the actual issues that my particular production process is going to impact on? And how much which of those things are important? I guess it's a balance between which of the things that are material, which of the things that matter, and which of the things that you can influence. So as a small brand, you cannot influence everything, but you can know that that's an issue and think about how you might be able to influence it in the long term. So it's a bit of a rambling answer, but I think the first thing is design your business and your products for sustainability. And the second one is understand all of the material issues, not just the ones you're passionate about, and have a strategy for each. Bearing in mind that you're not going to be perfect. So being honest and transparent about where you're strong and where you're weak, I think is a great place to start.
That's great. I'm going to start going through questions in the chat box soon. So if people have questions, continue to put them there. One that I saw that actually didn't end up in the chat box, but just as a comment, was asked whether or not Good On You looks at take-back programs and recycling programs. You know, places like H&M or Zara might have a donation box where you can bring back old clothes. Are those things that you take into account?
So we have one of the important themes of the under the environment heading, we look at resource use, climate change, water, and chemicals. And in resource use, there's a few things that are important, but number one is your choice of materials, and number two is how you deal with circularity or waste. So, we all know that fashion creates mounds and mounds and mounds and mounds of waste, and that waste goes to the landfill. That landfill creates greenhouse gas emissions, etc. So we want no waste. We want zero waste ultimately if we can get it. So take back programs are one of about 30 different things we look at under that heading. And so brands have a number of options that they can be using. They can promote resale. They can help their consumers with other end-of-life things. They can take back goods. And at the same time, a take-back program, if that's the only thing you're doing, isn't going to get you very many points. So if you're, H&M does do a range of things. Let's say do a Fashion Nova, which is not doing much at all. And I'd like to come back to the question of H&M and a Fashion Nova in a minute. But if the first thing you want to do is institute a take-back program, you're probably not doing it right. You probably should be looking at your supply chain first, and the take-back program is kind of an extra thing on top of that. If that makes sense.
Yeah. One question that's come up a lot is, how can small brands get on Good On You, or get Good On You to look at them or pay attention to them? A lot of people are eager to be on the platform.
Yes. I know. I mean, this is one of the challenges we have being such a small organisation. We would love to be able to get every brand on there, within a week or two of when they approach us, or at least to do the rating assessment and have a conversation about whether we publish it. But So we have got a bit of a backlog of small ethical brands, sustainable brands that want to get on Good On You, and we are currently building some systems to make us more efficient in getting those brands on there. You will find on our website under in the FAQ page and also on the How We Rate page a link to where you can fill in a form to start the process, and I'd encourage you to do that, but also ask you to understand that it might take a bit longer than you would like to actually happen. But don't let that put you off. We'll get to you as soon as we can once you fill in that form.
Yeah. Another question was someone asking, is it bad that some companies that brand themselves as sustainable make some of their clothes in China?
This is a really interesting question. I think for me, the number one problem there's a couple of problems in China. One is that labour unions are not allowed, or the labour unions that are allowed are controlled are not kind of free and under the control of the workers. And that's the number one problem. Yes, some parts of China have poor environmental standards, although I have heard that some parts are improving rapidly from people on the ground who go there. So I guess what the short answer is, there's a mix, I think, of real problems and prejudice involved here. There's a bit of both. Is China worse than, say, Ethiopia in terms of labour rights? Probably not, on average, but maybe Xinjiang province excluded. But is it, so I think that it's up to the brand to demonstrate that, notwithstanding the problems with things like lax regulation and no unions, they are actually supporting workers and addressing the environmental issues. So I think it's an issue you should be concerned about, but then is it an absolute no? I think probably not. I think it's saying, okay, you just decided that the only way you can get your stuff made is in China, but what are you doing to ensure that the environmental impacts and the impacts on workers are not harming them?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I can't see the end of this question, but it looks like it's asking about the cost of doing things sort of more ethically. What do you say to that when people would say like, oh, well, I could get this thing cheaper somewhere else? How do you sort of address that within the platform?
So are you talking about the brand can get the input cheaper, or are you talking about the consumer can buy a dress cheaper?
Both maybe.
Yeah.
Consumer, but
So I think there's a couple of issues here. The first is that it's undoubtedly the case that it costs more money to make things sustainability, all things being equal. By definition, if you're paying workers a living wage and you have the same amount of workers as another brand who isn't paying them, then your cost base is going to be higher. So that's the first thing. Secondly, until we get to a much higher scale of using sustainable inputs, they are frequently, but not always, more expensive than non-sustainable inputs as well. Of course, there are some, great breakthroughs where people are making products, materials out of waste, and the price of those will come down to be competitive. But so from the consumer's point of view, they have to accept that it is more expensive for a brand to do the right thing by workers, environment, and animals most of the time. I think the second thing is that we have all, to some degree, been influenced, brainwashed by the fast fashion mindset. 30 years ago, clothes were, compared to average incomes, clothes were, I think, something like 4 times more expensive. I'm sure you've looked at this. But so our mothers and grandmothers and fathers and grandparents' generation were paying a much higher percentage of their pay packet for each piece of clothing. And we kind of have been spoilt, if you like, by £8 dresses and $10 dresses and so forth. And of course, that doesn't mean that it isn't tempting. I guess that the other way to look at it is the cost per wear argument, that if if you buy something from a sustainable brand, it may probably, not necessarily, last longer and get more wears out of it and be a little bit less on trend and therefore go out of fashion less quickly. It doesn't help you if you're the sort of person who has to be on trend every second. So then I guess you've got resale options. So we have a number of articles on our website trying to address this issue in more detail, how to be sustainable on a fast fashion budget. But you know, it obviously has challenges. They have challenges to do with mindset. Like, do I need to have new clothes every day? Maybe I don't. Maybe I need to get myself out of that fast fashion way of thinking. Or is it actually I do? So I need to find ways to do it which are sustainable, such as resale options, Depop, etc.
Mm-hmm. We have one question asking about whether or not Good On You does home products. Sounds like it's only for clothing right now.
Yeah.
They said, I know beauty is coming. Maybe.
Okay, short answer is right now it's fashion. We certainly want to move to other issues soon. Likely beauty and personal care products would be next, but homewares would probably be the one after that.
Okay. Gotcha. Let's see what else we have in here. There's a few people asking if you want to hire them.
I mean, I saw somebody saying that we should hire our third staff member. We've actually got about 8 equivalent people working on the team, a couple of computer people, a few ratings analysts, the founders, and some content creators. So we would love to, the person suggested we should hire a third person. We'd love to hire more ratings analysts. We'd love to hire more content creators. We'd love to hire more engineers. Just don't have any money. So that's why we have a business model and why we like to promote it. So if you do want to help us create jobs, use Good On You as your starting point for your shopping, and that will help us maybe get some money to hire more people so we can rate more brands and employ some of you. It's our dream to be able to rate every brand and you know, help consumers more and maybe hire a couple of people to do that.
Mm-hmm. This is a question, I think we have a number of small business owners who are following this. So one was asking, what do you think is the best way to get new customers?
Look, well, I'm not a marketing expert, but obviously, I mean, the first answer is going to be that if you can get listed on Good On You, then we can help you. But, you know, I think, you know, I'll just be repeating what others would say. I think telling authentic stories about what you're doing and why is one, and giving really good customer service and asking your super happy customer, make your customers happy and ask them to tell their friends would be 2 tips. But, you know, I'm not a marketing expert. That's the best I can do, I think.
Fair. You got into this a little bit earlier, but maybe it would be good to go into a little bit more detail about ratings and how they relate to brand size.
Yeah. So, yes, we do. I can see the question there from Anna Laura. Yes, the rating system methodology does distinguish between large brands and small brands. The large brands, we look at about 500 data points, and we look at a fewer number for smaller brands and score them a little bit differently. Secondly, even within large brands, fast fashion brands, if we identify a brand as having a fast fashion model, we'll score it down a little bit. And we're looking all the time at ways we can improve the methodology and finding ways to, we're currently just about to start a process of looking at the way we rate small brands, and that, no promises, we may even divide that between medium and small brands as well. So yes, we do.
All right, I'm just looking through to see what other questions we might have. I, again, can't see the end of this question, but I think they're asking about when companies are claiming something, making claims about their own sustainability on Instagram, but there's either less information on the website or no information on the website. What does that mean for customers? I'm assuming if you're working with a brand, where does the information need to be posted in order for it to be considered legitimate for Good On You?
Well, look, we like to say that we stand in the shoes of the consumer, the customer. So if the customer can't find it when they want to find it, it's not much use to them. So if it's in an Instagram post, which is now, 3 months out of date, that no one's going to look at, it's not much use if it's not also on the website. So I would say, why is a brand only posting this on Instagram? Why doesn't it also put it on its website? It doesn't need, some brands will say, but our website has a particular look. Well, it doesn't have to be front and center, but it has to be there somewhere. Have a link at the bottom saying sustainability, transparency, and provide the information there. So I would be suspicious if brands, sometimes they'll do it in all honesty and out of enthusiasm and, we've just got this thing we're going to tell the world. That's fine, but get it on your website pretty soon, I would say, would be the best advice.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Well, I feel like we could keep going for a while, but we're almost at time, so I think I will let you go. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat today, Gordon. It's really good to hear a little bit more about Good On You, and thank you to everyone who joined us. It's really great to hear all of your questions.
Thanks so much, Whitney. It's great to meet you, and great to meet everybody on the live. So anyway, if you have more questions, you can hit us up on our info@goodonyou.eco address, which you can find on our website, or put them through our poor social media manager on Instagram if you must. Great.
Yeah,
bye, everybody.
Good. And I'm also easy to find on the internet. I'm at Unwrinkling on Instagram. I've also been a speaker in the past at the Sustainable Fashion Forum. So if you go through the archives, this year was my 3rd year doing something with them this spring. And hopefully when we're all able to be in person again, I'll be back there live. So thank you everyone for joining us. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.